Hey, Rei Caldombra here. So, I love Pikmin. It's one of my favorite series ever. It's so creative and fun, to be really cute and also have heavier themes. It has great jokes here and there. I love its nature and weird creature aesthetic. It can be both tense and very relaxing. I love how with this series you can go for both for a challenge or for more relaxed gameplay. And now we finally have Pikmin 4. Been so excited for this game and so happy we finally got it after about 10 years. So let's get right into the review. This isn't going to be super formal or end with a rating number. I'll just be giving my thoughts on specific points that I have written down. So, first general bracket of stuff I'll be talking about is the story and basically overall points for Pikmin 4. So, rescuing and curing people, I think, is a satisfying primary goal. All different Pikmin games have had different things you want to collect treasures, fruit, whatever. Or the ship parts. Well, I would say the ship parts still remain the most satisfying thing. I think just the motivation of rescuing and curing people, I think, is really great. Just it gives you more of like a you have like plenty of like an ethos motivation towards actually doing what you're doing outside of just making money. Or because yeah, with Pikmin 2, once you hit the goal, you really there's really no reason to collect treasures other than for your personal satisfaction. With fruit, I think there's plenty of reason to get all of them because like, you have an actual story reason to get all of them. It's because you're trying to like save your planet. So I think that's a good reason. With the ship parts, they do a good job just creating having Almar be a character where you want to get all the ship parts because you feel like you want to build up his possession, and you get the little logs that give either some funny or more personal like anecdotes about why this part is important or something along those lines, which gives you motivation to continue collecting those. And yeah, I just think for me personally, rescuing people, I just think that's a great reason to be on PNF 404 and a good reason to get through how all the lengthy segments of the game. So I think it does a good job of motivating you. And for the point of the story, I have absolutely no issue with this being a separate universe from the first three. Because I think they took this opportunity of this method and really did something good with it. Took what was good before about Olimar's like original plot and put a twist on it by having it be basically they basically repurposed the bad ending of plot one of Pikmin 1 and made it as part of the main plot, which I think is interesting. And I'm glad Olimar's back and is an important part of the story because he's just a good character, and we spent so much time with him. That's good that they kept him in the story. But this is much better than how they continue to use him, especially in three. Because like the reason for him being in three is honestly pretty dumb. It's basically they say that the plot of two happened again, and just he's on the planet just for more treasure again. Like it feels like they couldn't come up with a better reason. So this, I want to assume that they realized that wasn't a very good reason, and they thought, okay, how do we get Almar back on PNF 404? We can do a new universe and have him need rescuing, and I just think that was a really great idea, and I think it's executed well too. I'm really glad he's here, and I'm happy with everything they did. And I also really like the fact that we're not playing as Olimar, because which they started with three, is by having the core cast not be directly related to Olimar, which I think is good. Because again, I like Olimar and I want him to be in the story, but I don't always feel like I have to play as him. I like that he's relevant, but I like seeing new characters getting hints about different parts of the universe. Pretending it's a new universe, but you get to see all these different characters, specifically with Pikmin 4, you get so many characters. So this really feels more, Pikmin feels like it has more of an actual universe now. Which, yeah, I think that was also a really great thing, and that's even better than 3. So this is something that doesn't bother me, but I could totally see it bothering other people, because specifically it relates to what they did with 3. If you don't like cutscenes and lots of dialogue, like with 3, you may be a bit disappointed. I don't mind because I like the story elements. I like the character. I like characterization. So I'm totally happy with them. But if all you want to do is just play, 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 I can understand being a bit disappointed. How with 1 and 2, the 2 stops you sometimes with the dialogue from the main ship, but here and in 3, they stop you a lot with dialogue and the characters talking. So I don't personally mind. It's not really a detriment, but I can understand how for other people that's a negative. And just speaking just about the overall game, there is so much to do, and it's great for that. You really do feel like you're free to do what you want and in what order, because there's so much to collect that you can really get to all the areas fairly fast. Like I haven't tried doing like a proper fast run of Pikmin 4 yet, but I'm sure you can get through each area in probably just a day or two. It seems like the speed run for it is pretty short. But because there's so much, but there's so little that's forced on you, you can really get whatever you want. You can focus on the caves, you can build up your Pikmin numbers, you can get tons of material because you need a ton of material if you actually want to do everything. There's just so much you can do. I think it's really great. You have so much to collect, and all of it contributes towards something. So, yeah, there's just so much to do. And I think most of it is good and fun. And this can be said with all the Pikmin games, especially considering the time, but the game is gorgeous. It looks so nice. It is just beautiful just walk through the world and just look at things, even if you don't want to actually focus on combat or collecting stuff. And the soundtrack I also think is good. I don't think any Pikmin game has a bad soundtrack. I don't think any of them beat Pikmin 1 soundtrack. It still has the most iconic soundtrack, but this game still has some really great songs, great sound effects. And on that point, and as I've said, something I love about Pikmin is that it can be so relaxing with the aesthetic and with the music. I remember one time when I saved and went to the title screen, and I got the one that's on the screen right now, like the menu screen with the lemons and the cookies. I was planning to just get up, but after listening and looking at it for a few seconds, I sat back down and just watched and listened to the whole thing, and it was just so relaxing and nice. I feel like I had a lot of feel like I had a bunch of stress just like sucked out of me at that point. Felt at peace for a moment with Pikmin. Yeah, Pikmin can be very cute and wholesome, and that's really nice. And again, on that point, the Picklepedia is back properly, and it's great. You could totally, like before, you could spend hours in the Picklepedia and just relax and just read and learn. Except Pikmin just has created such a nice world and like overall vibe and aesthetic that's just so nice, and elements like the Picklepedia just feeds right into that. And the last overall point, I'll talk about Ochi. Ochi is super cute. I think he has a great design, and he's really fun to use. And this is also a good transition point into the next section, which is going to be about the new gameplay elements and changes. So yeah, time to get right into that. So, so one thing I love about the Pikmin series is that each game has core differences that make them unique and worth playing. And I'm glad this game has a lot of interesting changes too. Because when it comes to like longer running video game series, I don't like when like a sequel game is just a straight up better version of the first that's largely the same, just slightly improved. Because then to me, the previous game doesn't really have much reason to exist. But with Pikmin, I don't feel that way at all. I feel like all Pikmin games have core differences that are great and give you plenty of reason to go back and play them again. It's one of the reasons why I feel so attached to the Pikmin series, is because there's never any reason to like just put down one of the games forever. Obviously, now that Pikmin 4 has caves, technically Pikmin 2 is not unique in that aspect, but it still has a lot of differences that make it worth playing. And I just think that's something very important about the Pikmin series, is that every single game I have a reason to go back to and play again, and that keeps me playing Pikmin more. And I'm glad there are plenty of unique things in Pikmin 4 that really just make it so that I can see myself coming back and playing it all the time without detracting at all from the previous games. So the one biggest new thing outside of Ochi is the Pikmin, which I do really like them. I think the freeze mechanic with the ice Pikmin is fun, both in the overworlds in terms of freezing water and in combat. It functionally is very similar to bitter spray, and you you could argue that ice Pikmin are maybe a little bit broken. They're definitely the strongest for combat. Yeah, I feel like maybe they are a little bit broken. I don't think that hurts the game too much because yeah, with weaker enemies, yeah, just it totally destroys them. The second they get frozen, they're pretty much guaranteed to be dead. But with boss enemies, I felt it didn't feel as overpowered as bitter spray was. Or I didn't feel like I was killing enemies as fast as I would with burp spray. So I think that's good. It's a good gameplay mechanic that can make things a lot easier, and it's also something very easy to just not do. Because I would argue there's very little that requires the ice Pikmin. So if you don't like using them in combat, you have plenty of other types to use for that. If you just want to use a Pikmin that's strong in combat, just use reds or purples. So while it is really strong, I think it's fun and it doesn't like break the game in any way. So a lot of people, including myself, I mean, were concerned about the balancing of Pikmin coming in with two new Pikmin, one that interacts with water. So while I don't think it's perfect, I do think all of the Pikmin have some parts that make them necessary. Though I would say winged Pikmin, I think got it the worst. I haven't 100% of the game. I've just fully completed it. I haven't got that in cutscene and beat the final boss. I did a good portion of the game. There really is not a lot that the Pikmin are needed for, which is a bit of a shame. Because yellows can hit pretty much everything they can hit, while also covering electricity. But for me, honestly, that's not as big of a deal because I love the winged Pikmin. So it sounds like that'd be a bad thing. But for me, it's not because I'm going to use pink Pikmin just because I want to. Just because I think they're super cute and fun and unique with the wings. So I'll still use them. Blues were the main type I was concerned for, but I don't think they got off as badly as I feared. Seeing that, like when the water freezes, it still leaves the items stuck in the water. So, like freezing water doesn't make it so you can get underwater objects. So, all the Pikmin overall, I think they have they have what they need to be used for something at least. So, I don't think it's a huge detriment. Moving on to the next big gameplay thing is the Andori battle, which I love. It is basically Pikmin's bingo battle mode. It's pretty much very similar to that, just in my opinion better and more optimized. I think it's I think it's really fun. I can't wait to try it out with some of my friends in real life because I've only done it through the actual gameplay, which is fun too. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to say about it. I just think it's really fun. It's a really great way to turn. They did a really good job taking the Pikmin gameplay and turning into something that can be done with another player. Yeah, Dandori Battle is super fun. I can totally see myself opening the game just to like play Dandori Battle with my friends, similar to like other party games. So, getting more into specific gameplay changes now. One of the things is that there's no limit to the number of days. So, I like the day limit in 1, and I think the juice based limit in Pikmin 3 is perfect. I think yeah, Pikmin 3 is perfect because it gives you a time limit that is the direct result of what you choose to do. It's also not overly harsh for the people who play it slow. So yeah, I like day limits. I not a, I don't like. That's one of the reasons why I'm not a huge fan of 2. I still like 2, but it's my least favorite, just for clarity. But normally I would be disappointed in there not being a day limit. But with how massive Pikmin 4 is, it would not make sense to have a day limit. It would not make sense at all. Because if you're not rushing through it, especially on your first playthrough, you could go really slow and just enjoying doing what you're doing. So with 4, I think the amount of content justifies the lack of time limit completely, in my opinion. So I have absolutely no issue with it. Yeah, one minor gameplay gripe I have is that now it's a bit harder to make Pikmin go above the carry limit of an item. Yeah, when you throw or rush, the game will momentarily stop you from continuing the throw, or the other Pikmin not carrying it will not continue to help. So Pikmin also don't automatically help carry things that already hit the bare minimum. So like if you've noticed, if something has 8 carry, if you throw 8 Pikmin, it will momentarily stop you from throwing more Pikmin. You have to basically go out of your way to overload carrying an item, which I'm personally not a big fan of. This isn't something that totally ruins the game. It's just something I thought was a little silly and annoying to have to deal with. Because a lot of the time I go out of my way to go above the minimum so I can get stuff back faster and I don't have other things that my Pikmin do at that very moment. So now it just takes a little bit longer to do that. It does help if you're trying to do multiple things in a small area because you can just easily get more things carried faster. So it has its positives and negatives. So this is a minor gripe, but it's just a general gameplay thing. I noticed that I would prefer it didn't do that just because of how often I overcarry things. But this is just a minor thing. It's not a huge issue. A big one, probably one of the more controversial things, is that you can only have 3 types in the field at once, outside of caves. So I think that's an interesting change, and I actually don't really have a big issue with it. With the amount of Pikmin that there are, I would not want to be swapping between all of them. Like, do you really want to be swapping between all of the Pikmin plus Ochi? Do you really want to be clicking the swap button like 8 times to circle from one end to go all the way from one end to the other? I really don't. So I'd like this as something different, and this fundamentally changes the way you go through things, where you go into caves, the way you have to explore in the overworld. This is one of those gameplay changes that I mentioned between that like none of the other premium games have that I view as a positive because I think it creates more diverse gameplay. It just makes things different in a good way that makes you change things up. So I honestly have no issue with this point. But I can see how people could find it annoying. But yeah, I like it. But on that point, which slightly contradicts my statement, on is that you find new Pikmin in the caves, and you don't always get the onion associated with it right away, which that can be a little frustrating at times due to the 3 Pikmin limit. So at one point, I spent a long time with only 5 pinks. I just happened to not find the pink onion based on what I was doing when I first found pink Pikmin. And because you can only have 3 different types of Pikmin, because I only had 5 pinks, I never took them out because I can't really justify just having 5 of one type. That just hampers going through the world. So overall, I kind of do like that you don't get the Pikmin and the onion at the same time. I do think that's interesting. But I just want to specifically bring up the point of how with the 3 Pikmin limit together, those that can be a little problematic at times. Maybe if you go more comprehensively area by area, it's probably not as big of a deal. Or if you use Ochi's smell scent thing, it's probably not as big of a deal. But yeah, that was just a small minor gripe. So those 2 things, I don't think they interact in the most organic and satisfying way possible. But both points on their own, I actually do like as differences in the gameplay. And I like that when you go out of caves or Dandori battles, you land in that same spot and can continue the day. Because I think that kind of adds more opportunity for strategy. Because by going in those caves, you effectively pull all your Pikmin from the map into your location once you get back out. So I feel like you could really use that a lot strategically because you basically get a field reset. So when I start trying to go through the game properly fast in the future, I'm definitely going to be thinking about that. And going back to major changes, night mode. I think night mode is awesome and ended up being exactly what I wanted. It's both intense and difficult and really fun. And again, is a gameplay change that very largely alters the way you have to play and think about things. I think it's awesome. I think it's exactly what I wanted. And the last minor point is minor gameplay changes. Enemies do not respawn outside of caves at all in this one. which, ending on this section on a little bit of a negative, I'm not a huge fan of this. With how big the maps are, I think it would make sense that it would take a long time. Because I understand why with how big the maps are, you would not want the enemies coming back really fast. Because that would just make it a lot harder to get around and move parts fluidly. But not doing it at all just makes it feel like you gain control of an area way too easily and you just make it like final, which I think takes away a bit of the organic nature of the world. And both figuratively and literally, the areas lose a lot of their life because you can just turn into a total dead zone, which I think just doesn't fit and really isn't very. There's some satisfaction you can get out of that, but I just prefer the idea of you need to keep on your toes and think, oh, enemies could come back, and usually the ones that come back are not huge deals. It's not like snaggers are popping back up in random places. It's usually small enemies that can be easily dealt with. So I would prefer if there was still enemies respawning in the overworld. Again, this isn't something that's a big deal. That's really the trend with Pikmin 4, is that there are some gameplay changes and things that have small gripes with, but nothing that really ruins the experience. All right, now that I'm done with gameplay changes, I'll be moving on to world areas, treasures, creatures, new stuff, but specifically thinking of the actual individual things rather than gameplay elements. Okay, so in this one now we've got 6 areas, which is a ridiculous amount, and I think all of it's great. I really like the new exploration gameplay elements. There's like the pine cones, the buttons, the fans. Like, it's crazy that we went from basically 3 full proper areas and then one last boss area that was really not really a proper area in itself, all the way to 6 full proper areas. That is just so much more, and thankfully it's all really good. And my number one gameplay element that I was hoping for with Pikmin 4 was something like a beach level that had the tide rising and falling, and that is exactly what we got with one of the areas. So while it doesn't radically change things, especially once you get blues, it's really cool, and it does make a big difference when you first get to it. So yeah, I think that was done really well. It makes the area feel a lot more alive as well. Partly outside of just a gameplay perspective, it really shows the world moving, like the world changes. It's not just some static area you're in. This one's definitely my favorite area, and especially seeing it in the hero's hideaway, where there's so much more verticality, specifically in that level. That's really cool. That just it makes things hard to see, which is kind of interesting and rare in a Pikmin game, and it just really changes how you have to look at things and navigate the world. And also, speaking of Hero's Hideaway, being in a fully furnished modern house in a Pikmin game honestly feels surreal, but it's really cool. It's totally unique. Because like with the first 3 games, the world's largely has nothing is ruined except for just man-made stuff. The treasure is left behind. But here, this 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 area is styled like a house that's not in a post-apocalyptic world. Obviously, there's no humans, but maybe it's like right at the beginning of what happened of what you could say happened in the original Pikmin universe. But yeah, it's just really cool, both thematically and in terms of actually being in there. You get to see so much different things you normally wouldn't see. And this is another reason why I think them going to separate universe was a great idea, because they got the opportunity to do more unique things like this that wouldn't have really made sense in the first universe. So with this universe being different, it can actually work and fit well. So I just think that was really well done. Again, I think going with the new universe totally makes sense. I'm in full support of that decision. And don't have as much specific to say about all the areas, and it would take forever to go deep into every single one, but I like all of them. I don't really have any major issues with all of them. And yeah, I think they're great, fun to explore, great to look at. They all have something unique stylistically or gameplay wise in them. Yeah, they're great. And when it comes to new creatures, also overall, I like them all. My favorite has to be the watermelon elephant, which is the snoot whacker, and the slug thing with rocks on its back, which is the Gildemandui. Figured I'd go with not just saying their scientific names for the people who don't know them. So the elephant I really like because I love watermelon. It's my favorite fruit. And also, just the idea of a hard shell with a really soft inside, that just lends perfectly to a Pikmin creature. That was like made for Pikmin gameplay. Yeah, that's just a really great concept. And the slug, this new, the Gilmandui is just really cute. I love goofy blob creatures like like Clodsire and Quagsire from Pokemon. That those types of things. I love those designs. They're so cute. The Snagger babies are also really cute. Yeah, I think those are my three favorites of this one. The I'm forgetting its proper name, but the Toadstool that takes control of your Pikmin. I'm really glad they got brought back, and in general, the returning enemies, especially the bosses from the earlier Pikmin games, were great. They really great choices. And one of my favorite cave levels in the whole thing is the one that has the big toadstool. I won't be specific in case someone's watching this without going all the way to the final cave. But there's a floor with this in it, and it's definitely one of my favorite floors. That was really challenging, totally unique. That was awesome. But yeah, when it comes to the creatures, I think overall they did a really good job. The new ones are interesting. There weren't like a ton of new ones, which I think is fine because they already have such a big roster, many of which have not returned in every game. So I don't think we need a ton of unique Pikmin creatures every single game. So yeah, I think they did a good job with the creatures, good picks for the returning ones. The new ones are cool. Yeah, and I have a whole section because I haven't talked about caves much. So I wanted to put caves in its own section, which it deserves because it is obviously a big part of this one and is a big point for me and it can be a big point of contention in the community, which I will open up with this statement that Pikmin 2 is my least favorite Pikmin game and the caves are why. But good news is that Pikmin 4, in my opinion, does the Pikmin caves a lot better. So I have much less of a problem with them here than I do in Pikmin 2. Which biggest improvement is that you can go to specific subfloors from the beginning as long as you've been there once. That is a huge improvement. Because Pikmin caves, especially in 2, were so long and could take so long to get through. So even though you could leave the cave without getting everything, because they're so long and you always had to start from the beginning, in my opinion, you are very much disincentivized from actually doing that because you don't want to go through all those floors again, especially when you've already gotten everything. It just becomes tedious. Because in general, I think the caves are so long to the point that they get a bit tedious. So instead of breaking things up like I would want to do in 2, I just kind of force myself to go through it. And because I have to do that, generally I enjoy it a lot less. Because main things with caves, I think they're too long and they break up the natural gameplay of Pikmin because the time-based thing. Even if there's no day limit, it's just 20 or whatever minutes is one day in Pikmin. And I don't like how in Pikmin 2, some caves were so long that you could spend half an hour, 40 minutes in a single cave. And to me, that just completely like breaks the natural flow of the game and often ends up being too long. Really it ends up hurting my enjoyment of it. So by letting us go to specific subfloors again, it's so much better because you don't have to go through the entire cave again just because you made a big mistake on the last floor and suddenly you have to go through the whole cave again. That sucks. But now you can go directly to whatever floor you want to go to as long as you've gone there once. And that just makes returning to caves something I'm actually willing to do. So that is a big improvement. And another improvement is that I like, even though it's very little, it's only 1/6 of the time. Time does pass on the surface if you go in caves. So it retains a bit more of the pacing and logic of the core gameplay. But going into caves still does amount to some time loss on the surface, so it still feels more like a commitment and still works into the day flow because of how it affects time. So yeah, both of these are very good changes that even just these two things on their own make me like caves so much more. So yeah, there's a ton of caves, like with Pikmin 2. Because with Pikmin 2, I'm gonna do a Pikmin 2 review eventually, so I can go more in detail in that. But yeah, like I said, Pikmin 2 caves I think were too long, and there were too many of them. I think too much of the game takes place in the caves. So while Pikmin 4 does also have a ton of caves, many of them are short. Many of them aren't even more than 5 floors. So I think that I'm totally fine with. That I really don't take that much issue with. And there's much more in the overworld as well, so it feels better balanced. There's more caves, but there's also way more in the overworld. So I don't feel like I'm spending 75% of the time in the game in the caves. That's what I didn't like. Here, I feel it's much better balanced and more organically placed and spread out. So I think, again, they've done them a lot better. Also, in terms of having unique concepts. Because everyone knows subterranean complex, and that I'm very much in agreement. It's one of the highlights of the entire Pikmin series. One of the best single gameplay elements. And that's not good just because the water rate's great. It's good because it's a completely unique gameplay concept within that cave that makes it more worth going and doing again, because it doesn't just feel like more of what you've already done just again and again. And Pikmin 4 has more caves like that. I would be much more okay with caves in Pikmin 2 if more of them had unique concepts. In Pikmin 4, I feel they do. Yeah, I think the caves just have more interesting stuff in them, and that just makes it better than just like random enemy spam or stuff like that. I think that's much better. Yeah, and some of the challenging parts, because that's one of the things that's good about the caves, is that it gives the opportunity for challenge because it's a longer gauntlet where you can't really recover. You can only slightly recover Pikmin. So I think the challenge aspects of it are good, especially again, not gonna be specific. The last cave has some really great stuff in it. The third to last floor destroyed me, but I think it's awesome. I think that was an awesome, super sick challenge. And that's something you can really only do in a cave because of the nature of the different floors and how each floor can be its own thing. So like I think they just in 4, I think they took caves and just did them much better. There still are a lot of caves though. So I would say, because one of the things also with 2 is that I rarely ever 100% 2, just because it's so long and the caves can drag on so much. Pikmin 4 is a lot better at that. But I do still think, similar to 2, because of how much there is in Pikmin 4, I probably won't come back and 100% it as often. So we'll say with 1 and 3, if I replay 1 or 3, I 100% them every single time. I pretty much always 100% them. With 2, I almost never do. And with 4, I feel like I'm more likely going to. But just with the nature of a longer game, it's less likely that I will. But I still think with 4, it's less of an issue because on repeated playthroughs, I can just pick and choose which caves to do and not do. Because that's the thing. I think the caves, doing lots of caves back to back, I think is what can get really grating about them. So overall, I think Pikmin 4 does way better with caves than 2. And I just think they took a lot of the issues with the caves in 2 and either removed them or made them far better, like far less of an issue. So it gets big points in my book by bringing back a gameplay element I generally did not like and actually made me, for the most part, like it. So gets major points for that. And now to conclude, I think Pikmin 4 is super great. I'm really happy with the game. I have minor gripes, but that's really it. I don't have anything that like maybe want to just like rage or that really that I thought was really annoying, or maybe just like, oh, you know what, I'm done. I need to take a break. Nothing really like that. I honestly think it was worth the wait. Not only is just the gameplay generally just very good, very fun, and there's so much stuff in it, and just in general, I think it was 100% worth the wait. And I would definitely recommend this to anyone who has or hasn't played Pikmin, because I think this is a lot of Pikmin at its very best. And I would say so, but is it my new favorite? As of now, I think one is still my favorite, but this is like very likely will settle as my number two because I think it just has a lot of the modern strengths of three, and that the gameplay is much more polished. There were very few glitches and stuff like that. It just feels very polished and complete. But one, I just have so much favoritism towards one. A bit of it's nostalgia, but it's not entirely nostalgia. I really like the shortness of Pikmin 1. It's just a very short and super sweet like gameplay experience. And that is but it's true also that's different from 4. 4 I wouldn't argue is trying to be like that. Which again goes to my point that I brought up earlier about how all the games have inherent differences that in my opinion are mostly good. So obviously I'll directly compare them because they're in the same series. But in Pikmin 1 and 4 to me are not the exact same type of game. I wouldn't say that they're the exactly same type of game. Obviously they're mostly overarching, have the same things. But I don't think Pikmin 4 is the game that's meant to be beaten in one. It's not meant to be beaten in one go. While Pikmin 1 I would largely argue is. So I would rather say that they're different rather than one is better than the other. But I would say one is still, I think, my favorite, just being completely subjective. Looking from a more objective standpoint, I would say 4 is the best. I think it has the best overall merits out of all of them. If I was to tell anyone to play a single Pikmin game, it would probably, I would say 4. After that, it would be 1. But yeah, I really love this game. It was worth the wait. And 10 years is a heck of a long time. But the most important thing to me is always that the game is good. So I will always be one to not encourage rushing. I would gladly wait 10 years for a game if that's how long it really takes to make the game be good and something the devs and the company is happy with and proud of. Something that they display proudly, in my opinion, like Pikmin 4 absolutely is. This is a fantastic game. So if it takes 10 years for a game like this, okay, I'll wait 10 years. I would rather get a good polished game than get a rushed game. I'm a huge Pokemon fan, so I know what that's like. And yeah, I don't want a Pokemon Sword and Shield with Pikmin. Sorry to throw in Pokemon opinions there. But yeah, I am super happy with Pikmin 4 and would highly recommend it. Yeah, this game's awesome. Can't wait to play more of it, which I'm going to do very, very soon. And also soon, closing this out, say that I will be putting up reviews for all the other Pikmin games. No ETA on when that will be coming, but since I'm starting with 4, I figure I might as well continue and go in reverse chronological order. So I'll be doing Hey Pikmin next, which I'll say from the get go, I am not an Hey Pikmin hater. So yeah, that's your teaser for it. I'm glad Sparklium made it into the game. I kind of think it's a interesting gameplay element. Yeah. So if you are curious to hear my opinions on the other Pikmin games or see any of the other stuff that I'll be doing, which is be doing general gameplay video streams, really just whatever I feel like doing. I'm going to continue doing reviews of video games or anime, more ones just like this where they're not super overly detailed, critical, all encompassing reviews, nothing super formal like this where I just go down points with my own, just really giving my thoughts on something. My reviews aren't meant to be super formal, professional, and official or anything like that. I really just want to talk about things I really like and want to talk about. So if you're interested more in that, and I'm a VTuber, I will be doing VTubing properly, which, well, I am, but I am still working on getting an original live 2D model. So I will have that eventually. Hopefully one day I want to do talk streams and other fun stuff, whatever I really feel like doing. Yeah, so look forward to the upcoming Pikmin reviews. And thank you for watching. This is Rei Caldombra.